How did the Confederacy's government and military structure function? If you're curious about how the Confederacy organized its government and military during the American Civil War, you're in the right place. Let's break it down step by step. The Confederacy's government was formed in Montgomery, Alabama, where the 7 seceding states created the Confederate Constitution. This document was similar to the U.S. Constitution, but with some key differences. For instance, it protected the right to own slaves and restricted the national legislature from enacting protective tariffs or funding internal improvements. The Confederate government had a bicameral Congress, just like the U.S., but with some unique features. The President, Jefferson Davis, had more power than his U.S. counterpart, including line-item veto power and the authority to dismiss civil officers. However, he was limited to a single 6-year term. The government also established 6 executive departments: State, Treasury, War, Navy, Justice, and Post Office, similar to the U.S. cabinet structure, but without a Department of the Interior. The judicial system of the Confederacy mirrored the U.S. federal judiciary, with a Supreme Court and other national courts created by Congress. However, the Confederate judiciary operated differently in practice. Now let's move on to the military structure. The Confederate military had 3 main services: the Confederate States Army, the Confederate States Navy, and the Confederate States Marine Corps. The Confederate States Army was the land-based force and was organized in 2 phases: the Provisional Army of the Confederate States, PACS, and the Regular Army of the Confederate States, ASA. The PACS was authorized in February 1861 and began organizing in April of the same year. It was the main force during the war, and most soldiers preferred to join this army because it offered higher ranks. The ASA, on the other hand, was the regular army but never fully materialized beyond the appointment of some officers. The Confederate States Navy was responsible for protecting southern harbors and coastlines, as well as attacking northern merchant ships to disrupt the Union blockade. The Marine Corps was established in March 1861 with an initial manpower of 45 officers and 944 enlisted men, later increased to 1,026 enlisted men. Control and operation of the Confederate Army were administered by the Confederate States War Department, established by the Provisional Congress in February 1861. Jefferson Davis, as the president, served as the commander-in-chief and provided overall strategic direction. Key military leaders included Robert E. Lee and Braxton Bragg, who played significant roles in directing military operations. The Confederate Army was organized into various units such as corps, divisions, brigades, regiments, and companies. For example, a regiment typically had around 350 to 400 men, and these regiments were raised by individual states. The military was also divided into administrative departments, which handled recruiting, supply distribution, and coordination with field armies. State militias played a crucial role as well, operating under the command of state governments and sometimes acting as standalone forces before being incorporated into the Confederate Army. The Confederate Home Guard was another component, tasked with defending the home front and capturing deserters. In summary, the Confederacy's government and military were structured to maintain state autonomy while centralizing power when necessary. The military was organized into various branches and units with a complex administrative system to manage the war effort. Understanding these structures helps us see how the Confederacy operated during the Civil War.